let's move on to David Barnett, who is the Managing Director of Pearson Australia, and I saw Pearson mentioned twice earlier on as a leading company in EdTech in Karen's presentation, so we are very pleased to have David here today. And as you would all know, Pearson supports schools and universities in many activities in online education, which range from early reading programs to the delivery of higher education and the provision of NAPLAN testing in a number of states around Australia. So I'd like to welcome David, and his presentation is entitled Being More Human in a Future of Artificial Intelligence-Enabled Education, 4 Ways Employers Can Future-Proof Themselves. Please welcome David. David.
May test my aging years. We have too much more of that. I'll need a clicker. Is there a clicker which allows me to advance my slides? Look, it's been a fantastic morning, hasn't it? Really some terrific presentations, which I'll try and weave through my through my comments this morning. I really enjoyed listening to Greg Pryor earlier. Greg talking about his 5 shifts and how we should be thinking about schools and education, which reminded me of a great example of democratised entrepreneurship at a school in Victoria, Templestowe College, which was referred to in a recent article Pearson published called The Problem Solvers by Charles Ledbetter. And that particular school's done some very interesting work in providing seed funding to student startups. Students self-select groups based on interest rather than age or stage. They have flexible start time to their school day to allow them to create their own schedule. They also partner with universities to acknowledge elements of student output as credits or prerequisites for higher education, all achieved within the existing curriculum. So it is very exciting to see some of the work that's going on to drive innovation in Australian education. I enjoyed Sharon Kerr's comments about the growing world of bots, slightly scary for our teacher community, but and I'll talk about that in my presentation, it doesn't have to be. And Karen Vignare's presentation just now really provided a fantastic theoretical and practical basis of the subject of artificial intelligence in education. I'd like the session to be interactive, so if I throw questions out there, please don't be scared, don't leave me hanging. I'd love to have people's thoughts, and I particularly want to pose a question with all the things we've heard about this morning, with all the great work going on, with the fact that AI in education is really here. Why aren't we seeing a greater take-up? What are the things that are inhibiting take-up in our schools and universities and in our workplaces, and what can we do perhaps to drive some ground-up change? I'll start with a very, very simple example of an application of AI in education just to get us going. Think about a Sydney businesswoman driving to work. She's thinking about an end-of-year financial review meeting with her colleagues in her Tokyo office. And her AI enabled device in her car says, "Would you like to practice your past tense today because we've got this end of financial year review with your Japan colleagues?" Because while let's call her Susan, while Susan can use her translation software to enable her to converse with her colleagues because she can't speak Japanese, unlike Sharon, she likes to practice her Japanese because it does help to break the ice and build rapport. It's just one example of the application of AI in education. And as we've heard this morning, it already exists. It's being trialled and experimented in lots and lots of different ways. And I think if we let it, it could really be a game changer in education. So how many in the room, can I just get a show of hands, how many in the room have had any experience at all with an AI device or software? Just a few, but probably in the minority, you'd say. So what I hope I'll cover in this presentation is thinking a bit about how AI Ed can benefit all stages of life and encourage all of us to think about what we at Pearson hope we're doing, which is to encourage a lifelong love of learning. And I'll try and cover this in 2 parts. The first we'll look at education institutions and their own integration and embrace of AI Ed and technology instead of making it the centrepiece, as an important distinction. and then a couple of comments about the workplace, although we'll hear from workplace presenters later on today. So let's move on to the question of Pearson and what we've been doing, and my clicker has ceased to work. There we go. So we work with, as Tim said at the beginning, we work with schools and universities, helping them think about how to use technology and content in delivering better learning to students. We've seen many schools and universities struggle with new technology and with the pros and cons of disruption and innovation. We've had our own challenges, moving from being a textbook publisher to trying to be a learning company, an education company. We are the largest in the world, but we often don't get it quite right. And we are committed to helping our learners, teachers and partner institutions to improve learning outcomes. I'm not an educator, I'm not a technologist, I'm a business leader, and my job is to help our company work with schools and universities, with teachers and lecturers and learners, think about how to make more effective use of technology products. And as I said, we've had some hits and some misses along the way. We've also seen up close the challenges that can arise when learning environments aren't ready, when instructors aren't confident, and indeed when technology is made the centrepiece rather than the enabler. And we've seen many examples, I'm sure we can all cite examples of that. And of course, across Australia more broadly, we've seen many examples where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, probably in the billions of dollars now, invested in smart boards, tablets, learning management systems, devices of all sorts of stripes, only to find that they're abandoned because they're too difficult to use, they didn't live up to their promise, they didn't change classroom practice, or sometimes, dare I say in the case of the Ultranet in Victoria, it just didn't work at all. Earlier this year we saw one high-profile school actually ban laptops from classes completely, saying that making students handwrite assignments and essays until year 10, claiming computers are a distraction. Well, I don't think they should be a distraction. Just like most workplaces, technology should be, and we should be aiming for technology to be seamless, integrated and supportive. I know that that's sometimes a pipe dream, but really should be what we're aiming to achieve, letting us get on with the job, increasing productivity and participation. Back in 2012, I was part of the then federal government's Digital Education Advisory Group, which was created to find ways of achieving high-quality contemporary learning outcomes from existing investments in education. This came right on the heels of the digital education revolution investment, the $2.4 billion one-to-one laptop program under the Rudd and Gillard government. The big ticket item, of course, was that $2.4 billion, which provided laptops to school students. And there were some very bright people in that Digital Education Advisory Group which thought about how we could create environments to leverage that investment to improve learning outcomes. In fact, building teacher capacity and the urgent need to build teacher capacity really was a central theme of that report. Unfortunately, for political reasons, the report sank without trace. One of the panel members, Greg Whitby, and we heard from Raju earlier, and a number of Greg's colleagues from Parramatta Catholic Diocese are here today, says, and I quote, "It always surprises me to hear people talking about going back to the good old days of schooling, but no one ever talks about going back to the good old days of medicine. Would you get your tonsils removed at a hospital which was built in the 1930s and hadn't been updated since?" Well, of course, it's great to hear from Greg because he provides quite provocative comments, doesn't he? And of course, this doesn't just apply to schools. Until all of us see technology as an enabler, I think our educators will struggle to deliver this country's innovation agenda. Greg Pryor talked earlier about future-focused teaching and learning practices. We've got to create an environment that allows our very talented teachers to focus on that. And we should acknowledge it, I think. We should call it out. Advancements in technology are going to result in the replacement of some jobs and some occupations by algorithms and robots. It's as inevitable as the implications of the car were for the horse and carriage. But it doesn't mean it has to be scary. I think it can be tremendously empowering and provide teachers with all sorts of different opportunities. Pearson recently released a research report called Intelligence Unleashed, an argument for AI in education. I'll quote from the paper. As humans live and work alongside increasingly smart machines, our education systems will need to achieve levels that none have managed to date. True progress will require the development of AI-ed infrastructure that will resemble the marketplace that is developed for smartphone apps, conformed to uniform international data standards and shared with researchers and developers worldwide. So rather than fearing the inevitable, educators could be learning how to harness the power of AI to better equip both students and society at large to adapt to a reshaped workforce. There's an enormous opportunity for educators to write their own future, but this will only happen if we move past fear of technology, and I think there's still a lot of fear of technology out there amongst the teaching community. Back to my businesswoman, Susan, that I mentioned earlier. While she may be learning through AI-assisted technology, it doesn't mean in that example that educators have ceased to exist, because the educational expertise required to create her lifelong learning companion was provided by pedagogic experts performing vastly different functions to those they do today. And so it's our assertion that educators must be central to the design of AI-ed tools. After all, behind every lifelong learning companion sits a team of humans with educational and technical expertise. As I said, at Pearson we've had our share of fits and starts with technology, including AI-ed products and services. We're trying to put our money where our mouth is. So in the hope that you do as well, here are just a couple of examples of things that we're working on right now. In schools, we're working on a range of online education games based on AI. I wish it was going to be successful as Pokemon, I'm not sure, that will aim to replace traditional assessment. Unlike tests and other schoolwork, students aren't afraid to fail when they play games, aren't they? They understand that progress in the game happens through experimentation, failure, and adaptation. Games provide the opportunity for teachers to see in real time how a student is progressing and how they can assist, instead of looking at a single mark at a single point in time and wondering what went right or wrong. In higher ed, which we've obviously heard a lot about this morning, we have personalised learning and analytics teams looking to improve teaching and learning through smart technology, particularly in data analytics. They're working on learning systems and personalised educational experiences. Personalised learning is not new to Pearson, we've been doing it for many years, but we're working on new offerings in online and hybrid learning environments. It's all an attempt to make the one-size-fits-all approach a thing of the past. Let me talk a bit about a couple of examples how we think and we might see AI working and making a real change. And I really enjoyed Raju's presentation earlier. Congratulate Raju and his team at Parramatta for what they've achieved in just 6 months. It's really quite phenomenal. And as Raju said, the next stage of their work is going to be looking at predictive capabilities, in other words, how to apply artificial intelligence through algorithms to those data sets that they're now starting to generate. Here are just a couple of examples of how we might see in a macro level AI-ed bring about positive change. NAPLAN is in the news today a lot. We'll hear a lot more about NAPLAN and our performance in NAPLAN in coming days. We're going to see a shift to online assessments. So NAPLAN is shifting from the pen and paper mode that it currently exists in to online in the next 3 or 4 years. And I think that AI-ed is poised to play a significant role in enabling the development of effective and personalised assessment. We know that today we have this single day in May when the NAPLAN is delivered to students in years 3, 5, 7 and 9. There's a lot of unintended negativity around that. It creates a lot of stress. The system's gamed. Sometimes schools tell students to stay home if they're not going to be getting good marks for the school. There's all sorts of noise around NAPLAN that probably isn't all that helpful. So rather than that approach, rather than the single day in May with all of that negativity, students will be able to take the test when the teacher thinks they're ready. They'll be able to take the test multiple times. Adaptive testing functionality will provide questions that suit the ability of the individual student, therefore making the whole experience more effective and more engaging. Machines will mark written work, taking human variability out of the equation. And I think the really exciting thing is how these technologies will allow a far closer integration between assessment and learning, between the ability to create remediation strategies using the insights that teachers get from the assessments themselves. We've got a lot of higher education colleagues in the room today, and we heard a little bit about the application of AI in higher ed. Australia has challenges around student retention. Something like 15% of students in first year uni end up dropping out. That creates all sorts of issues for the higher ed sector. In an article published last November, The Conversation suggested that uni dropout rates show the need for more support, not capped enrolments. Not only does this issue create additional cost and loss of value for the sector, but of course each of those students incurs a debt which, without a high enough income, won't ever be repaid, and that of course points to a deeper problem. To quote The Conversation again, better support needs to be offered to students post-enrolment to ensure they successfully complete their studies. The more diverse our student population becomes, the more diverse their prior educational backgrounds, the more diverse our universities need to be in supporting their educational needs. We agree with that conclusion. In fact, we provide a range of student services to institutional partners, including Monash and Griffith. I know some Griffith colleagues in the room today with their online education courses via a team of student success specialists. But what if through the application of AI Ed to student data sets and the use of analytics, new insights could be gained about these students? What if by including specific demographic information about those students, we could identify students on a path to fail far earlier and therefore develop more sophisticated, more targeted intervention and support strategies? What if all that data was provided via insights to teaching faculty, via alerts, to help point them to students who needed extra support? None of this is new. A lot of this is being trialled at different places already in Australia. But I'll come back at the end to think about why isn't it being adopted and embraced at the level that it could be, given the power it represents to drive change. Let me move on to my final comments. Wait for the clicker to catch up. Just a couple of comments about AI in the workforce. Obviously, the world into which we will send our learners is uncertain and changing rapidly. Right now, some Australian educators are in danger of descending into irrelevance by allowing economists to lead the debate about future skills and jobs. If you look at all of the big thought leadership pieces that have come out about the advent of new technology and the impact on work, it's generally all been led by economists. Educators should be far more involved in that discussion. It really should be the domain of educators. After all, who is better equipped to address radically shifting skill development needs than those who intimately understand that giving our kids the confidence to develop the right skills, adapt and be resilient in these exciting times will be part of the key to their future success. Let's assume that educators rise to the challenge. What will this mean for the future workforce and the companies that employ them? Let's start with workers. For workers, AI Ed will provide them with complex human skills not easily replicated by machines. In the future, formal education probably won't end after school or university. Every skilled worker will have their AI Ed companion, running real-time diagnostics based on verbal prompts. We talked about our Sydney businesswoman Susan earlier, and making sure that the name is not only, the AI Ed device is not only across, but skilled and credentialed in the latest developments in her field. So let's think about a radically different performance appraisal, that lovely event that most of us dread every year. HR specialists will become learning specialists. The badges and credentials of the HR specialist will be visible on the internet and transferable from employer to employer. The appraisal, therefore, will focus on the human aspects of the work as AI takes care of the planning and the transitioning of learnt tasks to automation. So what does this all mean? Do you think you could see any of this working in your workforce? To quote the Intelligence Unleashed report again, we need to be more human as society becomes more technological, to become more creative as work becomes more programmed, to become more empathetic as systems become more pervasive, to take the initiative rather than meekly follow instructions, to work together rather than to go it alone. We are not robots. We must excel at being human. These are really motivating comments, aren't they? AI doesn't mean that we'll all have to be trained to have the same personal style and become cookie-cutter humans, a terrifying thought. Rather, it means that we'll become highly adept at mastering complex tasks and ensuring our management style is tailored to get the best results out of the teams that we work with. It's not just workers who will need to be more human in an AI-enabled future. Industry too must deliver tangible social and human benefit both to employees and the communities they serve. I'm just going to leave you with a few thoughts here about things that workplaces must do to thrive into the future. Firstly, measure. Attach hard metrics to shared value. Secondly, personalise. Embrace AI ed and lifelong learning. I Am career pathways will be replaced by I Can badging supported by personalised learning companions. Thirdly, assess. Focus on micro skills development and ongoing active evaluation. Promotion style leaps will be replaced by active badging and peer assessment. Success will be collective, not just individual. Task-oriented training will disappear. After all, easy to teach and easy to assess means easy to outsource and automate. Fourthly, apply. Shift from what worked to why did it work. AI-enabled diagnostics will identify what worked, but humans need to understand why it worked so they can apply elements of it to different complex situations in the future. And as we at Pearson believe the ultimate goal of education is employability, our sector should embrace technology just as tightly as business does. So in conclusion, the future of education will only be in the hands of educators if they embrace and master intelligent technologies that can not only think for us, but think with us. They've got the power to truly change and empower instructors and learners from the cradle to the grave in new and wonderful ways if we let them. So I'd like to actually maybe provoke a conversation now based on all that we've heard this morning, and think about, given that nothing I've said and nothing that other presenters have said is coming 5 or 10 years over the horizon, it's really here. And many institutions are already hard at work implementing these technologies. So why is it then, and I had a chat with a colleague at the break, and I asked her about her institution, and her comment was that essentially it's a slow-moving institution, it's hard to drive change. We heard from Karen on the trough of disillusionment within the hype cycle, and we also heard about leaders and managers being underprepared. So what are the other things that are inhibiting the embrace and the progress that AI Ed clearly promises? I'll just throw it open to the audience. You can. You're breaking the rules though. That's all right.
Something very interesting about the personalized learning solutions for the higher education. So can you give an example to understand that a little better?
Sure. Did everyone hear the question? So it's really how you use smart assessment tools or widgets to assist a student on their learning pathway. So rather than just send a student the same question for a whole cohort, the technology, and this has been around for a while, and Smart Sparrow has been mentioned earlier, it's done some very good work in that. The question reflects the ability of the student. So the student answers a question, the machine then figures out where the student is at and sends them a question that is appropriate, and then allows them, scaffolds their learning far more effectively than a one-size-fits-all approach might have done in the past.
So which means you have a question inventory, and based on the answers,
Correct.
the next question.
Correct.
So it's like a practice session, or?
Well, the practice is part of it. Practice is about how the machine learns where you're at. You take a pre-test, and then the machine can then build you an assessment based on what it learns about you. This is also what we'll see. I mentioned NAPLAN. We'll see this when NAPLAN moves online, the development of questions that really reflect that approach to assessment, which is a big shift, very big shift from where we've been in the past. How long do we have left for this session? Can I check?
A couple of minutes.
You talked about hard metrics in measurement. Could you provide a justification for hard metrics, please?
Did everyone hear the question? A justification for hard... I guess we're just trying to comment on the need to measure. So the need to develop a clear understanding of how we're going to understand, how we understand that something works, and then apply the metrics then that will enable us to judge whether it's worked or not.
The word metrics is still in.
Sorry. I might ask others to comment on that. Did anyone else have any thoughts on that question? Are we out of time? Okay. Thank you.
Just take it, David. Thank you very much, David.